Chris, how you doing, man?
Oh, I mean, as far as my stomach goes, I mean, I felt a bit better yesterday. I'm not quite sure what's going on today. I just woke up. I felt great last night. I was like fucking elated after Nevada, you know.
Yeah,
and
man.
I don't know. I was in such a good mood. I did like a Twitter AMA, which was like completely out of character for me, and I was like very happy and talking to people. And I woke up this morning, I just feel like shit again. Every positive feeling is fleeting, man. But I did want to say I got so much joy yesterday. Like, we are going to see Chris Matthews age 10 years with every primary caucus that Bernie wins. It is so fucking funny. And like, literally, like, I made this joke yesterday in the DM, but like, by the end of the summer, you're going to be able to take like a screen cap of him on the news every fucking primary that Bernie wins. And if you like put them all together, it's going to look like that scene at the end of Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail where the Nazi drinks from the wrong cup. And just like, that's going to be Chris Matthews just like crumbling in the dust, you know? Like, he looks terrible, and it's so good.
Dude, he was visibly deteriorating when he was talking with Nina Turner. Like, there was like that like rainstorm that kind of like came through. It was like a quick rainstorm, and he was just grasping his jaws. Like, yeah, but Bernie Sanders is you know, he's got to form a coalition. I was like, he was hurting, man.
Lunatic. And I remember, it's so funny because like you remember back in 2008 when he said the thing about Obama's speech giving him like a tingle up his leg or something. Do you remember that? And everybody was like, well, first of all, like, okay, that's fucking weird, dude. Like, what are you even saying?
Yeah,
is that a saying? Are we supposed to recognize that as a saying or something? But then like the other side of that is like, aren't you a journalist? Like, aren't you supposed to be a journalist or something? Like what are you even saying? And then like now, fast forward 10 years later, and he's like, Bernie Sanders is literally fucking Hitler. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, overcoming the Maginot Line and taking France. And it's so illustrative of like, just like, we've lost all pretense of like all respectability, which was like by 2008, you know, the respectability or whatever, this pretense, this illusion we're supposed to have about network news. Like, it had already, cable news, it was already on its death rattle. But like, Obama it broke everybody's brain in such a way, you know, like it broke the right's brain, just like you're the first black president. It broke liberals' brains, being, you know, like someone like Chris Matthews thinking like, okay, like this is the end of history. This is like, we have our cool neoliberal manager of state and everything's just going to be fine now, you know, and then everything we're living in now is just a direct reaction of that. And just to see how much that's driven someone like Chris Matthews insane. Raving lunatic. Indistinguishable from a Fox News pundit at this point.
Absolutely. Dude, MSNBC yesterday was a fucking gong show. It was fucking gong show. I mean, you know, I started watching it because I had to watch it all day yesterday because I was like, this is going to be incredible. And I started out in the morning. I forgot who the journalist was, but basically they were just like talking about Russian interference and like how it's supposedly aiding Bernie Sanders and shit. And they were like, you know, Russia is using their money and their influence and their power to meddle in our U.S. elections. And then the next bit was like, the Bloomberg campaign is spending $400 million, and they're like it's a good thing or fine, and like completely unblinkingly and uncritically saying these things and not making the connection together. Like, it's so fucking transparent. They had a full fucking meltdown, and like every panel last night was struggling to talk and come up with like the mainline MSNBC talking points about how, like, you know, the Sanders campaign, whatever. I literally just got now like a New York Times alert on my phone that said Bernie Sanders wins Nevada. Second place still up for contest. And I was like, why? They're literally just making the news story about the other candidates somehow instead of just, you know, reporting on the actual thing that's happening, which is a real time, first time in history that there's been like a proper labor movement going on in America that can be televised on cable television and fucking tweeted about. And they're just like doing their best to ignore it. And they suck at it.
No, and I hadn't watched MSNBC in quite a long time, at least not nearly as much as I did yesterday. And I just like to watch elite media and to watch the Democratic establishment consensus just crumble in real time live on television was so fucking good. And to watch them try to figure out some way to, obfuscate that fact, like you were just saying, so satisfying.
It's really good, man. it's really good.
I think part of it too is there was some guy on Twitter I saw, I don't know, people were just like making fun of him, but like it was some guy, some analyst or something, and his tweet was like, it was one of these like kind of weird shock tweets, and he was like, look, I'm friends with a lot of high connected bankers and political analysts, and that group of people, we've all they've all been saying that Bernie Sanders just can't win, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I live in a bubble. And like, yes. Everybody of course responding to him was just like, yeah, obviously, like, look at your fucking look at what you just tweeted, and I think that's part of it. I mean, and this is how like ideology comes into play, right? Is that it's so naturalized and normalized for the people who are in charge of the production and distribution of information in this country to be of that class and to speak. Like, I think sometimes in the more conspiratorial way, there's this like idea that like, they all get together and they're like, all right, like, we're gonna make sure that nobody puts a good story out about Bernie Sanders, and to a certain extent, I'm sure, in some places that may be happening or whatever, but I think it's more of a structural thing, right? Where it's like the structure of these media conglomerates is such that you wouldn't ascend to any meaningful place within that structure if you didn't already adhere to a specific ideological worldview in which like, this just doesn't matter. Like, this is impossible. It's, it's a blip. We can ignore it. We can ignore it. And so one of the reasons why I think some of those people have gone so hard after Bernie Sanders is because it's frustrating, because it disrupts their entire worldview. It's the same kind of thing with like the Trump populism, right? Where it's like,
absolutely.
When that was happening in 2016 and everybody was like, no, it'll never happen. When it was like, he literally has like, fucking tens of thousands of people like chanting hail victory at his rallies.
Well, and their way of handling him was exactly the opposite of Bernie Sanders. It was like because it was such good ratings, like they gave him, like they fucking aired all his fucking campaign speeches. I mean, they gave him more fucking screen time than any other candidate because it was such a sideshow that they didn't take seriously.
Oh yeah. Shane, I was just like thinking about what you were saying about like the structure of power and how, there is no back room where people are conspiring to, have bad reporting about Bernie or something like that. But I was trying to
probably is somewhere.
Yeah, maybe. But it's like, I was just imagining a scenario like if you work if you're at a workplace, there's just certain things that you just know you don't talk about. It's like if you were working at a restaurant and the manager was just like this gross dude with like a horrible toupee, you just like know not to talk about the toupee.
Right.
Like it's just like certain things you just know that you don't talk about, or you just dance around it. And it's probably the same thing. It's like not necessarily spoken, but it's just like a tacit understanding.
Right. And again, on a, to take that metaphor or example a little further, right? The idea is that you're not going to advance to a managerial position at that restaurant if you say anything. And so some of that is like a conscious decision, right? Like if you're, again, if you're a worker there, you're like, oh, I should probably not mention that at all. But then, on a much larger level, the people who are going to ascend are the people who it doesn't even occur to begin with, right? Like the people who don't even have to hide that. People who just automatically think, oh yeah, that's fine, that's okay. And so when you're talking about it on a class level, right, it just means like people from a certain material and a certain social class who are just trained from birth, and then through all their like institutional learning and, their family, their social circle or whatever, to just not even consider these issues. Like it just doesn't even occur to them. And, this is not to take away from, obviously, again, there certainly are malicious actors, and there are people who are like, putting out a more kind of cynical view on it. But like, I think that for a lot of the rank and file, particularly if you're talking about just like regular journalists, right? The way that you end up ascending in those organizations is just because you already tacitly believe whatever is being said. I mean, we talked about this on the CNN episode with Ken.
Yeah.
This is one of the cornerstones of like manufacturing consent, right? It's like there are a lot of people who just like who are in those positions just because they've never even considered it, right? Like they don't think about these things, probably because on a class or material way, they've never had to.
Right.
And so I don't know. I mean, is there like a moral difference between that and then somebody who's like deliberately obfuscating something or lying? Dear listener, I leave that up to you.
I say we leave it to Central Park.
Hey, there we go, man.
No,
right.
cut that. No, cut that. Cut that.
It was
you're
fine.
Not. No,
it was
you're
fine.
absolutely not. You're absolutely not.
But back to the city planning things. One of the
know.
reasons why they built Central Park originally is because on the board of like the managers or whatever, people who are going to design the city in such a way, because it was like the 19th century, they had like these mystics, like these weird quasi like religious, almost like Rasputin type figures, and one of them fancied himself as some kind of like clairvoyant, and he had a vision in the future of this just blathering moron.
No.
And he thought like we're gonna need a place, we're gonna need a spot.
No. Oh God.
Really quick too, because you brought it up, Chris, with the fucking comparison to Hitler, like fireable offense, in my opinion. I mean, he's not going to get, but it's
literally there should be all of the boycott Hannity and like the pressure put on his sponsors and all this. Like easily, this is there should be just as much outrage because of Chris Matthews and the Hitler thing
Easily.
and of course he won't be fired.
No,
but it's incredible.
I could not fucking believe it when I saw it.
No,
I could not fucking believe it. I thought about this like when in like 2015 when I knew there was going to be a Republican primary, because I was like, there's nothing better than a Republican primary, because like all of the weirdest fucking shit in the world happens, just like they melt down for some reason. And I realized that like now we're just deriving as much enjoyment from a Democratic primary. I cannot believe this happened. The fucking Pete Buttigieg power outage thing.
I knew you were chomping at the bit. I was going to bring that up, yeah.
Oh my God. What the fuck?
Dwight is full of truth there on this.
They tried to fake a viral moment
Obviously.
with the power outage in the gym.
So obviously, yeah.
It's so obvious. And I don't want to run down all of the points about it, but I will. The power didn't go out uniformly. Like it was the house lights, then it was like the camera production lights, then you heard the pop of the PA. No emergency lights came on, which has probably been like a fucking federal regulation for any like public school since 1970.
Well, the immediate thing I noticed, there's multiple cameras.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? For dramatic effect, there's like cutting to different camera angles.
Yeah, it was like fucking Improv Everywhere did this or something, like a fucking flash mob in Grand Central or something. It was like set up like that. People were holding the phones illuminated both. Firstly, they were illuminating the phones as if it was like some app, not that they were using their the flashlight on their phones, which everybody's had since like 2008. And then some of them were holding it back towards the cameras in the back. Also, why did the cameras not lose any power? Okay, maybe we assume they have a backup, but like there was no report of there being any power outages. There was no inclement weather that like would have necessitated a power outage. And he had a fucking backup mic in his waistband in the back. You could see the red dot. Like it's completely fucking fabricated. And I beg any journalist to just ask him point blank, like, was this fake? Was this a setup? And of course none of them will, because they all fucking love a guy like Pete. And the most depressing thing is, somebody pointed this out to me on Twitter, like, he's 38, 37. Mm-hmm. Like, we have so much more of this.
Oh, dude, no. I was just thinking that this morning, man. Like, we've got years and years and years of his fucking bullshit to come.
Can we just there's in the same way that like Donald Trump, like I remember somebody said this like during the election, saying like he has a presidency sized hole in his heart that needs to be filled. Like there's just a well of grief that will never ever be filled. I think the same thing of Pete. Like he just craves this power in an absolutely psychotic way. In what fucking world would you enlist in the military after having gone to Harvard and gotten a job, as a high-paid consultant?
Yeah.
Why would you do it? Why would you go try to be at a forward operating base?
Patriotism.
I don't know, man. I don't want to give, too much time or energy or amplification of like, a second-tier candidate.
Third tier, loser, total loser.
Yeah,
he's done. His goose is cooked.
Get him out of here.
Who cares?
Get him out of here.
How the hell did he get in here?
I like presidential candidates who aren't losers.
Just because you mentioned the weirdness of the primary, not to get too off topic, but like my favorite moment from the 2016 Republican primary, and it was like very underreported because it was so fucking lame and in a very active and, you know, bombastic otherwise primary. But there was like one debate with where Ted Cruz had this like canned line that he tried that really died, where like he was doing that thing that everybody does at a primary debate where he's like, you know, any one of us on stage would be better than the person from the other party. And his like the way that he framed it was, he was like, that, you know, I watched the Democratic debate last week, and to me, that wasn't a debate between Democrats. That was a debate between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. And, like, it was, like, weird. And he, like, landed it, you know, and then there was, like, weird scattered applause because obviously nobody in the fucking Republican Party understands what the fuck is meant by that.
Oh, my God.
It was, like, a joke that I would make, you know? Like... And it was just so funny because you could watch, like, he was so happy that he landed this, like, excellent debate line, and then immediately his, like, face kind of went, like, started twitching out because nobody, like, was happy about it. It felt like he had to be like, I'm sorry, I meant commies and pinkos. Those are the terms, you know? You know, like he had no, the damn dirty Reds. Like, he had no... do it. So good.
You're uncovering a Pandora's box of Ted Cruz shit. But like my personal favorite with him was he had this like round table thing with just some boomers or whatever, and he was just reciting his favorite lines from like Princess Bride.
Yeah,
and they had to like laugh.
Yeah.
And then suddenly Carol Kane, his wife, runs in and goes, "Liar! Shut up, witch! I'm not a witch, I'm your wife. But after what you said, I wish I wasn't." The problem is he's afraid. Ever since Prince Humperdinck fired him, he's been afraid. Do not say that name. What? Humperdinck? I can't hear you! That's why I love the movie.
Like, I remember there was a guy that was sitting next to him, just like like trying so hard to laugh and like look like he's engaged and enthralled by this fucking completely hideous dude. First off, never recite lines of movies to your friends. Like, nobody wants to hear. Like, never do it. I mean, we'll do it, but because we're amazing impressionists. But, but like, never do it, please. Let alone to have the pain, the emotional labor that it must take to just sit there in front of a presidential candidate doing a hack job of like a Billy Crystal.
Oh God. Oh God.
So we get to look forward to about approximately 40 more years of that with Pete Buttigieg. God, I couldn't do 70 more years. Well, we'll be dead before then. But.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, none of us have 70 years.
I'm gonna live forever.
Millennials are going to all have wasting disease in another 5 years because of the stress from the shitty political economy.
We're gonna have yellow fever, dude. Which, by the way, is what it was. I looked it up. It wasn't hay fever. It was yellow fever.
Yellow fever.
So don't message me about it.
I have a ton of longevity on both sides of my family. Like, I got like one that lived to over 100 on my dad's side, and one that lived to like 99 on my mom's side. Several that lived to like nearly 100, like on both sides. And just like, man, I think about that. I'm like, oh fuck. Oh, no. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I want that, actually. All I'm asking for is just 10, 15 good more years.
Oh, no.
That's all I want.
I hope we get a lot more than that.
I mean, Chris, you got the Red Dead Redemption 3 to look forward to, you know?
Yeah,
and then
dude.
presumably 4.
Oh,
and
dude.
By that time, it'll be just like a thing you can plug into your arm.
Just ready for a full-on Westworld at this point.
Oh, dude, no, I mean, I did a couple posts on Twitter yesterday where I was thinking about, like, I was imagining living in the post-apocalyptic, like, I was imagining, like, some sort of, like, hellscape that's sort of, like, I was imagining, like, a mix of Fallout, New Vegas, but also Red Dead Redemption, and I was just imagining, like, just hunting in the way.
All right.
It was really fun. Yeah.
Like it's a Red Dead Redemption.
Cut all of this.
No. You're not cutting any of this shit.
Bleep
it was really fun.
Bleep it. No.
I'm not gonna be censored anymore. This is erasure of my voice. This is like what the media is doing to Elizabeth Warren, and I'm not going to stand for it.
By the way, I'm gonna leave him in the room. He's making a lot of noise, so if it becomes an issue, I'll just put him back in his thing. I can't deal with it any other way.
Yeah, no, I get you.
He has this bone that he soaks in his own piss, and then he chews on it, and then he hands it to me.
We're talking about Chris Matthews still, yeah.
Now when I was a young boy, about the age of 5, my teachers taught me I could be the greatest man alive. They told me I could change the world, be whatever I wanted to be. There was no one in the world like me. Every one of us was so unique. I'd not be an average man. No, sir, I'd be no average man. So I had those big dreams.
Welcome back, everybody, to Eat the Rich. This is a show about our political economy, late-stage capitalism, and the millionaires, billionaires, and multinational corporations hell-bent on staving off its death rattle. I'm Dwight, and today we have with us Shane.
Hello.
Decidedly Russian. And we have Chris.
Howdy, folks.
So, Donald Trump had a manic episode in the last few weeks. And,
no way.
And decided to pardon a bunch of people. I don't get the sense that this was, anything coordinated or whatever. He pardoned a bunch of folks. One of which caught our eye, a gentleman named Michael Milken. And maybe those that are a bit older than us, aka boomers, would know this name, but it was foreign to me when I first heard it. And so we decided, obviously, to look into this because, any time that Trump is commuting the sentence or pardoning or whatever, members of his class, I think it's really important for us to look into it and understand why he may be doing so. I mean, obviously, we can just cut to the chase. It's in his class interest to say, hey, these fucked up financial crimes that you do are actually fine with the head of the government. So that's saying a lot. We should pay attention to it. And so we wanted to go in and do a little bit of exploration to learn who this Michael Milken character was. So if we could just start, Shane, I'll turn it over to you. Let's learn about the pardon itself and a little bit of the background of this guy.
So I think I have this article here that kind of gives a concise rundown on the pardon, part of the reasoning for the pardon, a little bit of background on Michael Milken himself, and I think would be a good starting point to kind of launch our discussion of him. So this is from the LA Times from just last week. Article titled "Michael Milken's Pardon Follows a Decades-Long Campaign to Rehabilitate His Image." And so I'm just going to read from it here, and, I can pause as we go, and we can jump in and make comments and talk about it. When President Trump pardoned Michael Milken on Tuesday, it came just a week after the former junk bond king's Milken Institute had wrapped up its latest conference in Abu Dhabi, the UAE. The gathering featured a mix of high-powered leaders, including hedge fund guru Ray Dalio and former Republican House Speaker Paul Ryan. But it wasn't just about how to make money or navigate the Washington thicket. Reflecting the Santa Monica Institute's focus, the program of the 2020 Middle East and Africa Summit featured sessions on health, global diseases, education, and the environment.
There's a lot of global diseases in that conference.
Yeah. The article itself, and I think we can get into what this institute really is and what its real goals are, but just to continue to read here. The event marked the latest manifestation of the 73-year-old Los Angeles resident's decade-long commitment to philanthropy.
There it is.
It began before he pleaded guilty to felony violations of securities laws in 1990, but ramped up in the years since, and what became either an intentional or unintentional effort, depending on your view, to rehabilitate his image as the poster boy of 1980s greed. I like how it equivocates there, intentional or unintentional. Like, who knows if he's doing this to make him look better.
I think it's funny too. Like, I wonder if these guys even realize that you can just edit your Wikipedia page to say whatever you want. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in order to get philanthropists put first against, like, convicted financial criminal. You know what I'm saying? You can just edit it. You can just do it yourself. You don't even have to spend the money.
I know firsthand you could really edit Wikipedia pages to say whatever you want them to.
Oh, God.
Anyway, to continue here, here it goes into a little background of who he is. In a tearful admission of guilt in a Manhattan federal courtroom, Milken pleaded in April 1990 to counts of conspiracy, aiding and abetting failure to meet federal securities disclosure regulations, securities fraud, aiding and abetting a regulated broker deal to violate securities reporting requirements, mail fraud, and assisting in filing a false tax return. Milken was given a 10-year sentence, fined $200 million, and required to pay $400 million in restitution. He settled lawsuits for an additional $500 million. He served 22 months, and it really should say only 22 months of that sentence.
Yep.
So just under 2 years, at a minimum security prison dubbed Club Fed in Dublin, California, and was released after testifying against a former colleague. He was also banned for life from the securities industry.
Fucking snitch.
I've been to jail in Dublin, California. Definitely not there.
You weren't at like the tennis courts and stuff in
no,
Club Fed?
Absolutely not. No. That's funny though. That's where the Alameda County Jail is there in Dublin.
Oh.
That's where if you get arrested for anything in the Oakland area, that's where you go.
Wow.
Oh.
Fucking
So, Milken was among 11 felons who were either granted pardons or commutions of their sentences by Trump on Tuesday. Among the others was former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich, who was serving a 14-year sentence for trying to sell an open U.S. Senate seat held by Barack Obama.
Dude. Can we just pause for a second and just say that that's like one of the all-time bests?
Just blatant corruption in the most like antiquated Tammany hallway.
Can we just please appreciate his phone call, his wiretapped phone call of him saying that he was going to sell it?
I mean, I've got this thing, and it's golden, and I'm just not giving it up. Nothing.
I remember it was really funny. I remember at the time. I can't recall if it was like an auto workers strike or there was some sort of like labor activity going on, and like that was the first time I saw Rod Blagojevich, and he was like on TV, and they like for a second there the media attempted to make him some sort of hero because he was, you know, standing on the side of organized labor or whatever. I remember him making this speech, and he was getting all sorts of good press coverage, and then that was the first I'd ever heard of him. And then literally like a week later, it was like the trying to sell the Senate seat story broke.
So good.
Unbelievable. Anyway, please continue. Who else did Trump fucking wipe their diapers
Well,
for?
it doesn't. The article doesn't name them all here, but just to continue here, Trump's decision follows a long campaign by Milken and his supporters to win a pardon for him. In 2008, Milken retained high-power Washington attorney Theodore Olson, who served as Solicitor General under President George W. Bush, to engineer a pardon, but the president declined to grant the application. In 2018, financier Anthony Scaramucci, who served briefly as Trump's communication director,
very briefly,
very generous there, told the Times that LA financier Gary Winnick, a former associate of Milken at a now defunct investment bank Drexel Burnham Lambert, had raised the issue at Trump's inauguration, citing his commitment to health and global progress. Other proponents of a Milken pardon at the time were said to include Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, and
a longtime personal friend,
and Rudolph Giuliani, Trump's outside counsel. It was Giuliani's investigation of Wall Street malfeasance in the 1980s when he was a federal prosecutor that led to Milken's guilty plea and imprisonment.
Dude, it's the same fucking guys, dude.
Yeah.
It's literally the same guys.
So in its statement announcing the pardon, the White House called Milken, quote, one of America's greatest financiers, whose work created industries and, quote, also democratized corporate finance by providing women and minorities access to capital that would have been unavailable to them otherwise, end quote. So he's like a progressive. He's a social justice warrior. That's why they gave him the pardon. So you'll like this part, Dwight. The statement, the White House statement, that is, noted Milken's contributions to medical research, education, and disadvantaged children, and named more than 30 supporters of the pardon in the private equity, hedge fund, real estate, and other industries. They include Winnick, Giuliani, billionaires Tom Barrack, Ron Burkle, and Sheldon Adelson, LA Angels owner Arte Moreno, and media titan Rupert Murdoch.
It's like fucking Suicide Squad. Jesus.
In remarks made at Joint Base Andrews, Trump said Milken has, quote, done an incredible job for the world. He suffered greatly. He paid a big price, a very tough price, but he's done an incredible job.
Oh, my God.
Oh, man. Robert Hockett, a Cornell Law School professor and expert on financial regulation, said that Milken's years-long campaign to clear his name rubs against the very notion of contrition. I would think if he was actually doing this to atone, then he wouldn't be trying to get the record expunged, end quote, Hockett said. Which is a good point, and, this article kind of goes into it, but just to skip over it, and to sort of summarize here, to be clear, he already did the time, so it's not like he's in prison. This is like a retroactive pardon to expunge it from his record. The dude is 73 years old.
And a billionaire.
Exactly.
Who cares?
Yeah.
I think it's between $3 and $4 billion is what he is.
It's like
what he owns.
3.8, I think.
He's like the 600th richest person in the world. Right? Like, it's like a totally symbolic gesture at this point.
Yeah.
The only thing that it does, which the article points out, is it opens the availability for him to possibly, like, try to reacquire a trading license.
Oh, my God.
But, I mean, he said he's already not going to do it, and it's likely that, like, if he was he's probably... Whatever influence he could do in the financial industry, I'm sure he's found ways around that in the 20 years, 30 years plus since he got out of jail. So it's a totally meaningful gesture.
I'm sorry. Why would you even, if you're how old is he? 73?
He's 73 years old, yeah.
In what fucking world would you say, like, yeah, I'm worth $3.8 billion. I'm 73. I have, hopefully a few functional years left, a decade, maybe two. Why the fuck would you go back to work?
I mean, again, and this is where the rest of this gets into in terms of what he's doing now. I mean, most of his stuff is in this, like, quote-unquote philanthropy and then his, like, institute work. And so we can talk about, like, what that really looks like. But yeah, I mean, it's like, it's a purely empty gesture, right? That only matters in a prestige way, right? And as Chris, as you were saying, like, it sort of is a weird way for them to be like, I'm good. You know what I mean? It's like a totally weird, non-material acknowledgement. It's just getting this weird, like, kiss from the Pope or whatever. It's like
any one of these people, and I think back again to that story I told about the guy that I worked with who was like,
yes,
made a tremendous amount of money, like literally just fleecing old people over the phone, and gave an enormous amount of money to his church, was deeply religious, and it's like on some level, like, you have, like, in order to, like, reconcile with that cognitive dissonance that, like, I am a shitty person, like these people, they know on some level that what they're doing is wrong and is bad. You know what I'm saying? And, like, it's a part of it is probably, like you said, this prestige of, like, being considered a philanthropist or being able to, clean up your reputation or whatever. But, like, on the other hand, probably even more so, it's just a necessary coping mechanism to even be able to live with yourself.
I have a funny personal story I just thought of, but I don't know if it's a good time to bring it up. Maybe
please go on.
Hit us with it, Shane. Hit us with it.
My dad was born in Dublin, right? And he's quite old, so he's older than this fucking guy. But his father, right? So my dad grew up during the Second World War in Ireland, and his father had joined the British Army at that point. He was also Irish. But he did it while he was really drunk, and so then, like, immediately him and all the guys that he, like, signed up with, like, the day when they, like, sobered up or whatever, they, like, sold all the army equipment they had and, like, went AWOL because they didn't want to go down, because they also hated the British. Like, I don't know why they signed up for some reason. So they all went AWOL and then, like, were just basically deserters, which at the time, especially during the heat of the Second World War, that was a capital crime, right, to be a deserter. And they also, again, they, like, sold the equipment. But, like, so then later in the 50s, so when my dad was, like, I guess, in his early teens or whatever, Queen Elizabeth issued, like, a general pardon for anybody who had been a deserter, right, during the Second World War.
Wow.
And so she sent out, or, whatever, the Westminster, they sent out, like, literally, like, official stamped pardons, like, and it's on this, parchment, paper. It's very formal. It's got the stamp or the signature of the Queen or whatever, the royal insignia. And so one, like, came to my dad's house, and when his dad got it, he was, like, so proud that he got it that he, like, hung it up in his house.
Wow.
And my dad told me this is just like a story about his father. He's just like, what a piece of shit. Like, what a weird, like, why would you be proud of that? Like, if anything, it's like this weird mark of shame. And so it's the same thing with like this part in here. Like, at this point in your life, just kind of like move on from it. Like, why would you even want, like, why would you be like, oh, I get to go to the White House and get forgiven for my crimes? Like what a weird thing to do psychologically. Anyway, spending, just imagine the time of like high-ranking officials, including the head of government, that's like spent a half an hour being like, Michael Milken, I remember him. Rudy, you worked with him, right? You tried to prosecute him, but you couldn't do it. You didn't prosecute him, did you? He got a plea deal. You couldn't convict him. He only did 22 months at Club Fed. I'm still going with this like drunk, sleepy. No,
here.
it's really good.
Yeah. It's good. I like the sleepy, the sedated Trump.
Yeah,
I really like. There's something to be said about manic, like like on high doses of prescription amphetamine Trump. But I really like slurring his words.
Yeah,
like just fucking got hit with a shot of phenobarbital Trump. I like that Trump.
It's more. I have it more as like he's got like a nightcap on, like he's like Ebenezer Scrooge, with like a little ball on the end. And yeah, he's holding a candle, and he's like just finished his warm milk, and he's going into bed. He's like
mumbling to himself about people he knew in the 80s as he's trotting off to bed.
All right, Farrah Fawcett. A lot of people said she was a 10, but to me, she was a 7.5. And he just kind of finally falls asleep, and his eyes just finally shut, and that's it. And little Trump snores away. I don't know why we're infantilizing him.
I gotta say one weird thing while we're on weird tangents here, but the name Michael Milken, like you said, like this was not somebody that I was particularly familiar with prior to Trump pardoning him. And in fact, I think the only time I'd heard his name was there's a guy. Shane, you might be familiar with this guy. There was a guy about 10, 15 years ago in New York City. His name was, hilariously enough, Adam Sandler. But he used to dress up in an Elmo costume and like be one of the mascots in Times Square that would like take pictures with children and shit for tips. But he was like deeply insane and thought he was a victim of gang stalking and stuff. And he used to like, he got caught on YouTube. There's like dozens of videos of him like all over New York City in an Elmo costume screaming about Jews and screaming about anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. And like Michael Milken was one of the ones. So like every time I hear the name Michael Milken in my head, I hear like this guy in an Elmo costume screaming it at children in Central Park.
Yeah, I said this earlier this morning, Chris, and I'm going to say it again. You are the cultural archaeologist of our time. I don't know how you remember that or where you would even. I'm just continuously impressed.
He's a fascinating character. In fact, I believe now he's Cookie Monster, and he's been spotted. he's been spotted at the Grand Canyon. Like there's videos of him from last year at the Grand Canyon in a Cookie Monster costume, like warning people to not eat Chipotle because they're trying to poison everybody.
Is there a gas leak in here? What the fuck are you telling me, man?
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
I feel like I'm in a fever dream. What the fuck? Jesus Christ.
Oh, dude. Anyway, to circle back to Milken, and to just finish off some of the stuff in this article here, there's stuff about his past and specifically what he was notorious for. I don't know if I should read that or if you're going to go into it later, Dwight.
Go for it. Yeah, because there's a few specific things, but I mean, go ahead.
So, here, it's getting into his past, and it says, Milken pioneered the issuance of high-yield bonds for companies that were running out of money or needed capital, but didn't have access to it through traditional Wall Street channels. The issues gained the unflattering name of junk bonds because of their higher risk of default. The bonds also drew critics as they were employed by corporate raiders to take over and loot functioning companies, laying off workers by the thousands and draining the savings of retirees.
Fucking hell.
Milken wasn't known for lavish living, but his $550 million salary and bonus in 1987 alone prompted outcries.
Staggering.
And his 1980s era investment conferences at the Beverly Hilton were dubbed Predators Balls for attracting corporate raiders looking for new takeover targets. When Milken was sentenced in 1990, Richard C. Breeden, the chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, said that the trader, quote, stood at the center of a network of manipulation, fraud, and deceit, end quote. At the time, Milken's record-setting pay amounted to a quarter of the annual budget for Breeden's agency. Milken, however, has long defended his pioneering work. Again, that's his word that is just being repeated kind of uncritically here in the article. His pioneering work, saying the access to low-cost capital created more jobs than were lost. I'm proud of what we accomplished at Drexel, he told Forbes magazine in 1992, after he was released. We were matching capital to entrepreneurs who could use it effectively. We were creating investments that money managers needed in volatile markets, end quote. Now, here's where some of the stuff got interesting for me, right? In terms of like what he did after prison.
That was a hell of a voice you just did there. Did you?
What happened?
I thought you were doing something like an impression of something. No, here's.
No, that's just who I'm becoming. That's just what I'm naturally turning into as I approach the age of 30. Shortly after his release from prison in 1993, Milken was diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer and given 18 months to live. He survived the disease and launched a foundation that channeled more than $700 million into prostate research. In 2004, he was called the man who changed medicine by Fortune magazine, which noted the funding and visibility he had brought to the battle against prostate cancer. Milken also brought his well-documented work ethic to causes other than the Prostate Cancer Foundation. His Milken Family Foundation, which he started in 1982 with his brother Lowell, has made charitable donations of more than $1.25 billion. Thousands of teachers across the U.S. were recognized with no-strings award of $25,000 each. In 2014, George Washington University opened its Milken Institute School of Public Health with a gift of $50 million. Now, here's the turn, right? Milken also founded the Milken Institute, a think tank that promotes capitalist solutions to global challenges. It annually brings together several thousands of the world's most successful people in business, government, entertainment, sports, arts, and the scientists. If
I can read real quick, I was looking into the Milken Institute and I went to their website, and like this is the About Us blurb from the website. All right, the Milken Institute is a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank that helps people build meaningful lives in which they can experience health and well-being, pursue effective education and gainful employment, and access the resources required to create ever-expanding opportunities for themselves and their broader communities. Just gibberish.
Yeah.
You know, dude, actually...
Pete Buttigieg level platitudes. Absolute gibberish.
There's actually something in there that it's an extreme admission that when you read into it is amazing. Is the fact that they're proselytizing capitalist solutions to global problems, and yet they call themselves nonpartisan.
Oh, yes, they call themselves nonpartisan and non-ideological, but their whole thing is like fucking market-based solutions to public problems.
Right, this is Friedman free market nonsense gibberish. Yeah.
But it's funny to me because it just shows like how much that the Democratic Party is not an opposition party. Like they're very much, it's nonpartisan because they are very much have drunk the Kool-Aid of like the fucking, capitalist ghoulish garbage. But anyway,
Shane, maybe you can do the voice and just say that we're all swimming in ideology.
Dish Milken. What is this? What is this Milken? Is it like, some kind of flavored milk you drink like the Kool-Aid of ideology, and then this is, oh my God, I am swimming in it. Just to round out here, the last thing I wanted to say about this article, and I know that you guys will enjoy this, Milken has also signed the Giving Pledge, an initiative by Warren Buffett and Bill and Melinda Gates that commits signatories to giving away the majority of their fortune either during their lifetimes or when they die. Milken has an estimated net worth of $3.8 billion, so that was the figure you gave out before.
And yet somehow they're richer.
Yeah.
Somehow they're all richer. Yeah,
in fact, hold on. I found an article earlier about him signing that giving pledge, and it was back from the early 2000s, and I should have written it down, but if I remember correctly, I believe his net worth is oddly higher now than it was 18
all of
years
theirs
ago.
Are.
Just imagine that.
All of theirs are.
Yeah. So anyway, so the Milken Institute thing, right? Like that was in part what also really caught my eye. And if you go to their website, like Chris, you were saying, it's all this gibberish nonsense.
There's nothing there.
Here's an example of a when you go to the only thing that would be of substance, right, that like usually like the thing that think tanks are nominally supposed to produce are these like, sort of policy papers and, research analysis and stuff. And so they have a lot about health, as was repeated endlessly in that article, and again even in the statement about the party, and like, oh, Mr. Milken, he's done so much for global health or whatever. Here's the first thing that pops up when you go to the research and analysis page. It's a report called Silver to Gold: The Business of Aging. What? Learn about the growing economic power of older adults, the underutilized resource of mature workers, advances that can dramatically extend lifespan, health, and productivity, and a call to action.
Shane.
There's like all kinds of shit about aging here and health. And what's particularly of interest to me in regards to, some of the details that we learned in the article, like he got cancer, right? And he managed to survive it, which is, something that was afforded to him by his huge wealth, that, getting cancer and surviving it was not this traumatic, like life-ending experience or life-ruining or financially ruining experience, right? He was fine with it. And so then, that prompted him to like do research into prostate funding, right? Which like, okay, whatever, you can say that's a noble goal, but it's obviously totally self-serving. And if you recall too that the guy is 73 years old, all of the top things here in his fucking institute are all about like aging. Like, how can you extend your life? Like, what are good things you can do with your life? And again, I'm not saying that these are inherently bad things. Like, obviously, caring for seniors and people past the age of retirement and everything is a really important thing. But the reason why it's a focus here is because he himself is old. That's it. He's an old guy who's like, I have the money to do whatever I want, to research whatever I want. What's important to me? And he looks at himself, he's like, well, I'm old, so let's do research about that. Now, to the healthcare thing, I wanted to bring this up because this is the flagship thing that kept coming up, is this idea that like he deals with these chronic diseases and they do research on chronic diseases. And again, that seems like, oh, this is a good thing, right? Like, conducting research and analysis on what chronic diseases are, what are their causes, how do we fix them? Like, that's a noble goal, right? But if you go to their report, and so I have here their 2018 report about chronic diseases, and this is from the Milken Institute, the name of it should tell you everything, right? And the name of it is The Costs of Chronic Disease in the U.S. So, so now this 25-page document, I could not bear to read all of it. It is drivel. It is nonsense. There are a bunch of these ridiculous graphs. You can go take a look at it. It's publicly available. But the whole framing of it, right, is like chronic diseases are a social burden cost on the society. Now, again, this is true. This is that's not an ideological statement to say. It is true.
But not in the way that they think.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's bad, that we have a prevalence of, chronic diseases and we want to be able to fix them, right?
Because that's bad for the bottom line.
But exactly, that's
but they
their
want
point.
to
see the problem here.
They want to extract more work out of people.
yeah, right.
Because it's not like so you can enjoy your retirement and be able to pick up your kids.
No, not at all.
No, yeah,
your
we need to keep
grandkids.
you fed and healthy and be able to fucking get on your feet so we can extract more profit from your labor. And then you die.
So across this 25-page document, again, which is not even fully 25 pages, it's probably about like maybe 5 to 10 pages of actual text. The phrase lost productivity is mentioned nearly 10 times. And so if you go into how it's evaluating this, right, it creates this like, this is how much per person like it costs for us, like on a healthcare level, to deal with people with chronic diseases, right? So here's just a little blurb from this piece, right? Across the U.S., direct healthcare expenditures for chronic conditions average $3,300 per person. The average indirect costs, including lost productivity, are $7,900 per person. So the point that's being made here, right, is not just the way that they're looking at it, is they're not saying like, oh, healthcare costs are really high in this country and that's a bad thing. They're saying it's even worse when you take into a fact that like people with cancer can't work. They can't work for us. They can't. And so where's that extra like $4,000 of loss coming from? It's coming to the fucking owners and managers. That's who's losing it. That's how they're calculating it. They're not saying like on an individual level, that's how much it costs all of us. They're saying like on a sort of GDP level, right? That's how much money we suffer from. And then if you go, of course, to the end of this ridiculous fucking bullshit research thing, listen to this. These trends, and it's referring to the increasing costs of healthcare, these trends will impose upward pressure on healthcare spending in the United States. U.S. healthcare spending is already substantially higher than comparable high-income countries. health spending per person in the U.S. was $10,348 in 2016, 31% higher than Switzerland, the next highest spender on per capita basis.
Wow.
These trends make it very clear that the U.S. will need to identify and implement effective policies to prevent and manage chronic diseases. I wonder what a policy would look like that would make healthcare fucking cheaper. Because again, remember they're saying this with the whole idea of like, well, the market needs to do better. The market is working at the way that it wants to by extracting all of the wealth it can. They're not going after the fucking insurance companies or the drug companies that are the ones that are driving these costs up. They're ultimately, in a weird roundabout way, they're making about personal responsibility of when with the focus on lost productivity. They're saying, because you are sick with a chronic fucking disease, that's making us lose money. And that's your fault. That's what that's the way that they're framing it. So that's what this guy's, like, great contribution to fucking, you know, the healthcare industry or, you know, the idea of, like, medicine is. And that's just the tip of the iceberg with the fucking Milken Institute.
Yeah, no, let me talk about one other thing. Let me talk about this New York Times article, like one of the other sort of crowning achievements here of the Milken Institute. I found this article. It's recent. It's only from October of last year. This was obviously before the pardon, and hopefully I'm not going to repeat too much of what you just said about the details of his pardon and some of his associations and his crimes. But the headline is, "Symbol of 80s Greed Stands to Profit from Trump Tax Break for Poor Areas." So it starts off 1980s, Michael Milken embodied Wall Street greed, blah, 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 going into his crimes and, you know, convictions and stuff like that. And it says, Mr. Milkman has spent the intervening decades trying to rehabilitate his reputation through an influential nonprofit think tank, the Milken Institute, devoted to initiatives that advance prosperity.
His prosperity.
Okay, of course. Yeah. We all know. We all understand what that means. These days, the Milken Institute is a leading proponent of a new federal tax break that was intended to coax wealthy investors to plow money into distressed communities known as opportunity zones. An opportunity zone sort of being, you know, basically the idea is it's a tax credit, but it's only for like a capital gains tax. So it's something that only very wealthy people can even take advantage of.
Right.
In the first place for doing working on a project or doing something, developing something in a lower income area. So it says the Institute's leaders have helped push senior officials in the Trump administration to make the tax incentive more generous, even though it is under fire for being slanted towards the wealthy. Mr. Milken, it turns out, is in a position to personally gain from some of the changes that his institute has urged. This is his philanthropy, by the way. Mr. Milken, it turns out, is in a position to personally gain from some of the changes that his institute has urged the Trump administration to enact. In one case, the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, directly intervened in a way that benefited Mr. Milkman, his longtime friend. It is a vivid illustration of the power that Mr. Milken, who was barred, like you said, from the securities industry and fined $600 million as part of his 1990 felony conviction, has amassed in President Trump's Washington. And it goes on to talk about... here we go. Yeah, some of Mr. Trump's closest advisors, including Mr. Mnuchin, Jared Kushner, and Rudy Giuliani, had all lobbied the president to pardon Mr. Milken for his crimes.
Unreal. Can I just say something quick? I meant to say this earlier when we talked about when you mentioned Jared Kushner. Remember when Pod Save America was like, oh, yeah, so actually, Jared and Javanka, as we call them, is actually...
Oh, God, stop. I can't.
No, dude, he's like, they're the cosmopolitan people. They're young. They're from the city, and they're gonna actually bring a little bit of cosmopolitanness to.
They're good. They're gonna moderate his worst instincts.
Yeah, well, we know
they've done a wonderful, and they're gonna fix fucking Israel and Palestine. They're gonna bring peace to the Middle East.
But instead, it was just like Jared hanging out with Adam Newman, and like we work. Anyway, please continue.
So then it goes on to talk about the Milkman's personal material interest in the Opportunity Zone thing. It says the former junk bond king has investments in at least 2 major real estate projects inside federally designated Opportunity Zones in Nevada, near Mr. Milken's Lake Tahoe vacation home, according to public records reviewed by the New York Times. One of these developments, inside an industrial park, is a nearly 700-acre site in which Mr. Milken is a major investor. Last year, after pressure from Mr. Milken's business partner and other landowners, the Treasury Department ignored its own guidelines on how to select opportunity zones and made the area eligible for the tax break, according to people involved in the discussions.
Wow.
So it goes on. The unusual decision was made at the personal instruction, again, of longtime friend Steve Mnuchin, according to internal Treasury Department emails. It came shortly after he had spent time with Mr. Milken at an event his institute hosted.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
Yeah. No, so then it goes on to talk about a little bit about the opportunity zones themselves. It says the Opportunity Zone Initiative tucked into the tax cut bill that Mr. Trump signed into law in 2017, which I had some fucking moron on Twitter this morning trying to tell me like how good Trump's economy is, and he kept talking about the tax cuts and everything. Okay, so how have you benefited? And he's like, well, we have record low black unemployment, and we have, people have more money than ever. I was like, okay, how have you personally, let me reemphasize, how have you personally materially benefited from this booming economy you're talking about? And I believe he blocked me.
So can I just get this straight?
No, please.
Tell me if I'm understanding this correctly.
Yeah.
It's a tax incentive, so it's a discount only available to the ultra wealthy because it is that in the sort of capital gain sort of thing.
Right. That's what I was about to go on to read here.
Right. So, but for them to come in and literally buy low income neighborhoods.
Yes.
And specifically in the case of Michael Milken, he had a run-in with this current sitting Secretary of the Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, from whom he has an existing relationship, and from a quick, fleeting conversation that they had at his insane capitalist think tank's event, he was granted a bending of the rules for him to buy this specific 700-acre plot in Nevada. And
also a pardon later.
Fuck
but this is also like through like all of this. Like, this is the so-called philanthropy.
Right.
This is all being done, all this lobbying is being done through his organization, which is supposed to be, the way he's trying to atone for his sins of the 80s. Right. But no, it's even worse than just buying up,
by the way,
land in low-income areas. So
by the way, Chris,
says,
Sins of the 80s. Sins of the 80s is my new album. I just wanted to.
Nice. That's a Judas Priest album, the greatest hits. Judas Priest greatest hits. It says, but the incentive, also championed by some prominent Democrats, has been dogged by criticism that is a gift to the wealthy investors and real estate developers. From the start, the tax break targeted people with capital gains, the vast majority of which are held by the very richest investors. The Treasury permitted opportunity zones to encompass not only poor communities, but some adjacent affluent neighborhoods.
Oh, curious.
Right. Many of the money so far has flowed, would you believe it, to those wealthier areas, including many projects that were planned long before the new law was enacted.
Wow.
I believe Cory Booker was a proponent of this as well, the idea of opportunity zones.
I think you're right.
And it was framed as this idea of like, this is going to help, particularly like, underserviced and, minority communities and stuff. Like, this will be like great for, and it'll be an investment boom. But as you're pointing out, Chris, and I just want to like explicate this even for my own edification, because it's just like fucking maddening, right? Incredibly wealthy man, ostensibly is like sorry for having been a criminal, sets up foundations in order to rehabilitate his image. The work of whose foundations, right, although it does include random handout charitable things, right, also includes the development of an entire research think tank whose goal then is to create work, like intellectual work, that supports policies that will make him himself and his other friends richer. Like, that's what it is. That it's not like, that's what philanthropy is, right? It's like you spend the money to basically conjure up fake bullshit knowledge that then you can point to your friends who, luckily are now in high places and say, hey, look, we have X amount of reports that say this, and that these things will be incentive, and don't mind the fact that, hey, I'll actually get a huge fucking tax cut out of this. It's maddening. And then to turn around and call that philanthropy. I mean, this is like literally how the rich get richer. You accumulate this huge amount of money by stealing the labor of others, and then you use that money to leverage in a million different ways to make yourself look good and ultimately to just steal more from people. It's fucking sickening.
And then everybody's willing to ignore that if you donate a smaller portion of that wealth to prostate cancer research or whatever,
right.
and then you get called like the man who changed modern medicine, and like a front page cover story on Fortune magazine or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm having some trouble digesting this all.
The only opportunity zones that are real, right? Because that
Central Park.
I was going to say Central Park. Yeah.
God damn it! God damn it! No.
Just look at the flowers, Mr. Milkman.
Oh, Jesus
Just look at the flowers.
Christ. All right. Okay, let's move on.
How much you want to bet that if PragerU's financials were entirely available, that Mr. Milkman is giving money to them?
100%.
Or the Milken Institute
Absolutely.
is. Or somebody from the Milken Institute has been on PragerU. I'm actually going to look it up really quick. I'll circle back to me.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, sorry. It's not even like important at this point to go through what he actually did in like the 1980s that landed him with the sentence, because there's just so much material already for us to even have to do it. But yeah, in 1988, there's an article here from the Los Angeles Times here that lists everything that he did wrong, illegal, securities fraud with Drexel, Burnham, and Lambert. Before I say that, most of it was done in conjunction with a guy named Ivan Boesky. Basically, he was another trader, another finance guy that was from another firm, and he and Michael Milken would collude on deals. And so the list of the greatest hits are as follows. So this is from a 1988 article that just literally just says, list of allegedly illegal deals by key figures. And it said, here's a list of all allegedly illegal securities transactions involving Drexel, Burnham, and Lambert, which was Milken's firm, or other defendants named in a Securities Exchange Commission civil enforcement action Wednesday. The list includes transactions that involve the stock or merger activity of several prominent Southern California companies. Number 1, Diamond Shamrock and Occidental Petroleum. In 1985, Drexel executive Michael Milken allegedly, using inside information about a proposed merger between Diamond Shamrock Group and Occidental Petroleum Corporation, a Drexel client, told Ivan Boesky-controlled entities to buy Diamond common stock and sell Occidental common stock. And Milken and Boesky allegedly agreed to split profits and losses, but the Diamond board did not approve the proposed merger. Number 2, Kohlberg, Kravis, Robertson Corporation, and Store Communications Incorporated. If that name is familiar to everybody, I wrote that thread about those milk companies that were going bankrupt, Borden Dairy and Dean Foods. Kohlberg, Kravis, and Robertson Corporation, KKR, was the private equity company that bought Borden Dairy and sank it for profit. Drexel allegedly made $1 million in profit in April 1985 by insider trading after learning details of their client KKR's leveraged buyout offer for Store Communications. So just to pause there, he's using insider trading in general usually goes like this. You know something's going to happen, and therefore, before that thing is going to happen, you take a capital position on something. So, for instance, if you know, like, a pharmaceutical company is going to come out with this new life-saving drug, and it's not public yet, and you buy that stock because you know it's going to go way up, SEC's up your ass. Or, for instance, if you know that, like, the CEO of a company is about to be found guilty of sexual harassment or something like that, you short that stock position ahead of time. So you're getting to the market before you're getting knowledge of something that's going to happen in the market before that thing becomes publicly available. That's why it's called insider trading. It's illegal. Here's another one: Wickus Companies and National Gypsum. I love this shit. Drexel allegedly made $6.6 million in trading profit through Boesky purchases of National Gypsum stock before Wicks, a Drexel client, made public its tender offer in 1985. Drexel also allegedly made $1 million in fees from Wicks on the attempt to acquire National Gypsum. So they're using their client's own information to do fucking insider trading between Milken and Boesky. Here's another one: Stone Container Corporation. Drexel allegedly had Boesky buy Stone's common stock with inside information about a planned public stock offering in April 1986, thus manipulating the price of the client's stock. So there's like many more of these. Oh, here's one that's a callback from our previous episode with Ken Klippenstein on CNN. Drexel made $66 million in fees from the merger between MGM United Artists and Turner Broadcasting in 1985, while Boesky allegedly was secretly buying MGM United Artists stock at Drexel's request. And then, as we were talking before, here's another litany of false and misleading books and records. The SEC claimed that Drexel and Boesky's Simala Corporation maintained false or misleading records regarding 1. Simala's alleged purchase of MCA Incorporated stock at Drexel's behest after an aborted takeover by Golden Nugget in 1984, alleged rig and pre-arranging securities transactions between Drexel and Boesky to create fictitious tax losses for Simala in 1985. They're cooking the books, guys. That's what's going on. And for fun, if you're a connoisseur of shitty business-related movies in the 80s, you might remember Gordon Gekko's Greed is Good speech.
The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed in all of its forms. Greed for life, for money, for love, knowledge, has marked the upward surge of mankind, and greed, you mark my words, will not only save Teldar paper, but that other malfunctioning corporation called the USA. Thank you very much.
The screenwriter got that from a commencement speech that Ivan Boesky did in the 80s at UC Berkeley that he gave, and he's quoted as saying, "Greed is all right, by the way. I want you to know that. I think greed is healthy. You can be greedy and still feel good about yourself." The worst schools.
You just have to give money to prostate cancer research.
Other little fun tidbit, the sequel to Wall Street 2, Money Never Sleeps.
Oh my God, so bad.
Donald Trump is in it.
Was he on the phone with Gordon Gekko or something?
No, they're getting their hair cut at the same place.
Oh my God, that's right.
It's a fantastic scene. Highly recommend it.
No. First of all, can you imagine Donald Trump getting his hair cut in any sort of public place? There's
good.
No one has ever witnessed him getting his hair cut, other than the person who cuts it.
He's like sitting in the barber chair, and then Gordon Gekko comes in, and Gekko's like, "How you doing, Don?" And
That was
Trump
a pretty
is like,
good Michael Douglas.
"Oh, Gordon, fantastic. You making money? Money's great."
Hey, is this the one and only Gordon Gekko?
Hey, Donald. What are you talking about? You're the one and only.
So now I've got competition. It's a great place to get a haircut.
I love this place. I've been coming here since the 80s.
Well, the 80s are no longer, Gordo. The world is a tough place. How's life, Gordo?
Life is fine, especially with a hot new hedge fund. Enjoying my exile here in London.
Hot new hedge fund? Are you kidding? The economy's terrible. But you know what? Send me the details. Has anyone ever told you that you'd look great, really great, in a comb-over?
No, Donald, I'm a gel man myself.
Hey, whatever makes you happy, pal.
Donald Trump getting his hair cut, because they wet your hair often before, you know what I'm saying? You go to like a nice fucking salon or wherever he goes, like they're washing his hair, wetting his hair before they cut it. You just imagine him with wet, stringy, long hair, like looking like fucking Gollum.
Well, I believe on our extremely successful live stream that we did of the debate with JK I'm Fine Pod, I believe Jackie was explaining to us like what she thinks is the actual apparatus of his hair.
Oh, I've thought a lot about this.
She thinks that he's completely bald on top, but what comes from the back is literally a 3-foot long strand, like you said, fucking Gollum's.
Yeah, my man has a rat tail that he turns into a comb over. Yeah, every bit of that shit's coming from the back.
Unbelievable, man. it's unbelievable. Just, yeah. I don't remember what we were talking about. Oh yeah, Michael Milken. I just want to mention too here how he made his money with the junk bond thing. Before I say that, Shane, you alluded to this earlier about what he says inspired him to make money was to help women and communities of color. Mm-hmm. There was I really can't even believe that this thing even happened. But there's an interview that he did with David Rubenstein, and let's just play it here if we can.
On August 11th, 1965, what became known as the Watts Riots occurred. So I didn't have to go to Vietnam. There are armed personnel carriers on the street. The city is on fire. And it took a while for me to convince my dad to let me go and understand what was happening, because I was convinced I knew everything. And I met a young African-American man who was sitting outside looking at a building that had burned down that he worked in. No one would give any financial support to his father or to him because he was an African-American. And it struck me that I thought I knew everything, and now everything that I believed, a chance to succeed based on your ability, not who your parents were, not where you went to school, not your religion, not whether you were a man or a woman, that this individual had made an irrational decision watching the burning down of the building that employed him, and that he felt he wasn't part of the American dream. So I went back to Berkeley, changed my major to finance and business, and was determined to change that so that everyone felt that they would have access to capital based on their ability.
It's very fucking bizarre. I literally can't even believe that that's what the justification is. And he's given a platform to talk about this. So to know what a junk bond is, you have to understand what a credit rating agency is. And to understand what a credit rating agency is, you have to understand what a bond credit rating is. And to understand that, you need to know what a default rate is. So let's work backwards here. Quickly, a default rate is the percentage of all outstanding loans that a lender has written off after a prolonged period of missed payments. So a very simple way to say it is, if you don't pay your mortgage for 6 months, you risk of going into default. So it's basically saying that this debt is not secured by any income, right? So you default on the loan. So that's what a default rate is. So the rate is basically the rate at which this particular asset class goes into default. So that's how we come to learn what a bond credit rating is. Pretty simple. The bond credit rating represents the credit worthiness of corporate or government bonds. It's not the same as a credit score, like your individual credit score, but it's basically the same concept. These ratings are published by credit rating agencies. So again, it's like if there's a corporation and you need to know, is this a risky investment? Is this a not risky investment? You then go to a credit rating agency. So there are the big three credit rating agencies: Fitch Ratings, Moody's, and S&P. And they corner the market of like 95% of the ratings business. So you go to a credit rating agency and you say, hey, what do you think about company, XYZ? And they will say, well, we think that, their rate of default is pretty low, so we'll give them a AAA rating. That might be familiar to some people, like the AAA rating, double B, those sorts of things. Then we get to junk bonds. Junk bonds are bonds that carry a higher risk of default than most bonds issued by corporations or governments. Basically, they're not even rated. They're such shit that the credit rating agency was just like, yeah, just don't do it. Don't even have any part of it. A bond is, and again, just to explain what the actual bond is, a bond is a debt or promises to pay investors interest payments and the return of invested principal in exchange for buying the bond. So government bonds, municipal bonds will say hey, a town might levy a bond and say, we need to build a new water infrastructure or a new bridge or something like that, and we need to raise money to do it. They'll issue a bond. So you can buy it. You say, hey, I'm going to give this town $200 today, and the town is saying in 5 years we'll give you $250 for it. That's a way to do it, because then the town will say, we'll use that money to build the thing, and then we'll be an even better town and we'll be able to afford it. Government bonds tend to be very secure because, the town isn't going to go anywhere. It's not like a company who can fold up and lease the building to somebody else. The town isn't going anywhere, so they're generally very stable. A junk bond is the opposite of it. It's fucking fly-by-night shit. So that's what a junk bond really is.
Well, just to put it in perspective, that's what this guy built his empire on. That's where his money comes from, is by then constructing and selling and packaging junk bonds. So in terms of we talk about it a lot, this, what do rich people do, right? What does this class of billionaires do? What does he produce? What did he produce in the 1980s? What did he make? What services did he offer right? Like how, if now his whole thing is like, oh, again, reading from that gobbledygook from his fucking, institute site, like we're promoting good things on a global scale or whatever, right? Like what was his mission statement for most of his life, right? Like what was his like fucking job? And it was to do what? Like there is no social production. There's nothing. It's just to make money in the most predatory way possible by either selling bad shit that is wrong, so bad salesmanship, insider trading, like you had mentioned, and did he not do insider trading?
He did also. Okay. No, sorry.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Literally, my hangover is coming in and my head is bumping so hard that I was just visibly anguished.
Okay. No, but I mean, like, again, the point here is that, like, there's no social productivity to come out of him. So, like, a guy like this is, like, purely a parasitic fucking person, right? Like, that's what his, like, again, that's his world. That's his. Yeah. That's all he's ever contributed is taking money from other places, which is tantamount to legal stealing. It's legal theft. Like that's what it is when you like, oh, we're gonna like repackage this financial instrument and mix it together with this one, and then we're gonna sell it to this guy and do this. It's all this like middle management nonsense to numbers on a ledger that somehow the people who are in charge of that ledger, they always end up rich. Even if they go to fucking jail.
Man, I keep thinking about that video. I can't remember who posted it the other day. What was that guy's name? David Pena?
Oh my God, dude.
Dude, that guy, and I guess like to give the context, the video, and you just reminded me of it. Like I guess I don't know what date that video is from. I'm assuming it's from the Trump era. I'm assuming it's a current day video, and it's this very wealthy man named, I believe his name was David Pena. And speaking in very, very blunt terms about, like, in very profane terms as well, about, like, this is, a complete mask off, wealthy, parasitic, greedy piece of shit. Saying, like, this is it. Like, this moment with Trump in office, like, it's never going to get any better than this. And he's saying, I never thought it was going to be this good again since the 80s when I was raping everybody legally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Legally. Just stealing and just raping and pillaging legally. Mm-hmm. And they know it. And they'll talk about it in their private moments in very frank terms. Mm-hmm. And I think that video was so instructive and so shocking to see.
And to be clear, too, like, even if you're looking at it as like, well, okay, it's just middle management, like, they're shuffling the papers in between and they're just making money, right? Part of what Milken also did, right, was like, in terms of like setting up these conferences, but I mean, this was like in the 80s and stuff, like these conferences, like when I used that term corporate raiders before, what that means is they would find ways to restructure and buy out perfectly functional actual companies. So even if you're like a moderate capitalist, right? And you have the idea of like, well, businesses are good because they produce goods and services for the community, people make money, they create jobs. Like, even if you're taking that line, this strand of finance capital doesn't give a fuck about producing anything for the community. They go in, they find companies that are perfectly functional, and they say, is there a way that we could like buy this out, strip it down, sell it for parts, and make a bunch of money? And they say, yeah, even if that does end up destroying jobs or laying waste to communities or removing vital services that are at that time only being offered by the free market or whatever. And that's what they do. They're literally tearing and shredding perfectly fine existing market institutions, if you're going by that logic, for the purposes of just making short-term profit. And that's what it is. That's what undergirds the entire system. Like we've said a million times, there's no long-term thinking. There's no, like, thought for legacy or prosperity, except, I guess, after you have ass cancer and then you become a senior citizen and suddenly you've decided, oh, now I am going to think about the future. And part of that is how much longer could I live? Like, what are the tools of longevity? Like, fuck you.
Yeah. It occurred to me that I think we said this, that we need to make a rule that anytime we look into one of these guys, that we need to just do a quick Google search of whatever their name is plus Jeffrey Epstein. And I would love to share with you what I've just learned.
Oh my God! Of course, of course.
It's well, there's there's a few things here. One of which says there's this thing from narrative.org, and I guess they like did a deep dive into, it's called The Secret Life of Jeffrey Epstein, and they have something here that says Part 3, A Balance of Power. Our investigation into Jeffrey Epstein leads us to Leon Black, the CEO of Apollo Global Management, and we discover ties to Jared Kushner and the 80s junk bond king Michael Milken. Then there's another thing that says here, who was in Epstein's little black book. Names found: Gerald Lefcourt, who was an Epstein's lawyer, also a lawyer for Michael Milken, as well as publicist R. Corey Hay, was the publicist that Jeffrey Epstein hired after he got convicted of fucking child rape, and that is who Michael Milken hired as his publicist to rehabilitate his image.
Yeah, I was just while you were telling the story about that, I was looking. I did a search for Milken and Ghislaine Maxwell, expecting to find a picture. Unfortunately, didn't. I kind of figured that was certain to exist, but
yeah. Well, he's been a pretty. It's funny you should mention that because I was reading portions of the book that somebody wrote about him in 1992, and it said that he was an intensely private guy and that he owned all the pictures that were taken of him.
Yeah.
How do you own all? I'm just imagining Sonny Corleone fucking like breaking the photographer's camera and then throwing money at him.
Kinda, right? Like, I mean, if somebody takes this happens all the time, I believe, with like paparazzi and shit. Like, if they take unflattering pictures, you could they're either going to sell it to a tabloid or they could sell it to you. So if you don't want to have it get out, then they'll just sell it. They'll just buy it, rather.
I was trying to find, Milken Institute does have a handle on Twitter. It seems like they really just, they post about, their conferences and stuff. They're not particularly active. There's a site for Mike Milken. It's just MikeMilken.com, and there's a tab on that site called Myths. Myths, like myths about Mike Milken, and it's basically the very first thing is talking about philanthropy, and then the rest of it as you go down is like various attempts to debunk the criminal image of Mr. Milken. But it's funny. The first line here of this section. And so the title of this page is The Mythology of Michael Milken. And then the first line is, many people believe in myths lacking any demonstrably factual basis. Put urban legends into a search engine, and hundreds of such irrational beliefs appear.
Who wrote this?
So it's perhaps not surprising that widespread misunderstanding persists about the facts of Mike Milken's life. For an interesting view of how and why such myths about Milken arose, read the introduction by Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz in the 1992 Fall from Grace.
It's like you said. You said it earlier. It's just all the same fucking guys.
It's all the same guys.
It's just the same handful of people.
Yeah. There was just like a cabal of awful like finance capital venture capitalist shark assholes in the 1980s.
Yep.
And they ruined the country to the best of their ability, completely dismantling the post-war social safety net that was developed after the end of the Second World War, when everybody was like, oh shit, we probably shouldn't do that again. Let's figure out like some broad consensus we can reach, in Western industrialist society to prevent that from happening. Tore it all to shreds to make a quick buck in the 1980s, then went dormant and, started foundations and trusts and things. And now that, the kingpin of the 80s himself is fucking back, they're all just coming out of the woodwork.
Yep.
Getting pardons left and right.
They're all still alive because they're fucking rich, too. Like, they don't have to do the general American healthcare.
Right, exactly. This is how I would have ended that fucking policy paper I was reading about the costs of healthcare. It should have ended with, so the most reasonable thing to do is to just take all of Mr. Milken's money and just put that towards Medicare for all. That's it. Just take it all, and he can live, he can make a real living, an honest living, by putting on an Elmo costume and going out into fucking, wandering out into Central Park at sunup, and with his hands outstretched, just waiting for the blissful release.
Oh my God.
Do you remember when fucking Trump called Turnbull right at the beginning of his thing?
Yeah,
and
dude.
he said like the local milk people. Do you think he meant Milken?
Just one of the pills of his blood statin medication just like lodged in his brain. He's like, I was trying to make some more milk before I went to sleep.
Even funnier, or maybe just as funny line of that to me is, first of all, local milk people, like, not a string of words that has never been spoken by any other human being in the history of the world prior to that moment. But
Correct.
like also there's another, because remember the purpose of the call was he was really angry because Obama had some kind of deal where, the United States had agreed with Australia to take in a number of refugees that were being held in Australia, and Trump was obviously very upset with that, and he's calling, and the whole thing is this is going to make me look bad. This is I can't do this, and one of the, I believe, verbatim quotes is I'm the best guy in the world at not wanting people in the country. I can't do this.
Yes.
Yes. What does that even mean? I'm the xenophobia guy. Everybody knows that. Yes. I'm the best at it. I'm the best at xenophobia.
He gets it. He gets his brand, man. Unfortunately for him, that got leaked. That was funny as shit when that came out.
Well, I remember, and it's funny, we actually, Dwight, I think you and I were reminiscing about this the other day, it was that moment, because like you said, that was very early in his presidency. It was that moment, and then the other moment was, because remember when he first became president, there was almost this sort of bargaining, the stage, the stage of the bargaining stage where people in the media were okay, well maybe maybe the office of the presidency will mature him, and well maybe he's not going to be on Twitter so much, and maybe he's maybe it'll change him in some sort of way, and then within the first week, first of all there was the phone call with Turnbull, but within the first week there was the White House prayer breakfast.
Yep.
Yeah.
When he went and he talked about hey, maybe we should pray for Arnold Schwarzenegger. His ratings on The Apprentice, they're really bad.
So good. So good.
It's so good, and it's so funny because it's just good. You know what? Good. Get this fucking vulgar, just ridiculous caricature asshole in there to just make a mockery of the entire system and all its fucking norms for what it really is, and to lay it all bare, all this fucking respectability that we're supposed to believe in, all this American exceptionalism, and this reverence we're supposed to have for some stupid fucking annual function called the White House prayer breakfast. He's gonna go in there and rehash his petty personal grievance against Arnold Schwarzenegger.
It's so good, man.
And it's that. It's that was the moment where everybody was okay, this is just all right. This is what we got.
Yeah, but at the same time, guys like Milken see that and they're oh, here's my shot. I can finally get that pardon.
Absolutely.
I can finally run away with it.
What a boom.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Dwight. You were gonna say something.
I literally have no idea what I was gonna say. It's absolutely gone into the ether. It may as well have never existed. Oh, boy. I'm going to have a hard time doing this, but I'm going to try to stay cool, folks.
Stay cool, folks.
Yeah, we got to go. I don't know.
Yeah, take care. We love you all.
Okay.
See ya. Stay cool. Stay cool. Stay cool.
Yeah. Hey yo, greed is good. People act how they should. Greed is good. It's where Gordon Gekko stood. Greed is good. It's all about the paper, and this is why we use the middle class labor. Hey yo, real estate was booming. Homes were on the rise. Artificial rates, Greenspans old ties. Historic low rates. There were many home buyers. Consumers, banks, and traders all became liars. But that's not true. We bankers ain't liars. Wall Street was lending for you fat consumer buyers. A subprime mortgage meant a no-doc loan. We helped Main Street buy some sick-ass homes. You say Wall Street's greedy? That ain't right. Greed's not the problem, it's your lack of foresight. You corporate drones took these neg-am loans, defaulting as a payer, now we crash from market failure. Hey yo, greed is good. People act how they should. Greed is good. It's where Gordon Gekko stood.